Saturday, March 25th, 2017, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. I like to talk about prepping, even though I'm not a prepper by any, stretch of the imagination. And I don't want to, denigrate preppers or anything. I think if people want to have their hobby farms or do whatever they want to prepare for collapse of society or collapse of the economy or the financial system, they should do it as long as they're comfortable with it and they know what they're doing. Personally, from experience, I think humans tend to exaggerate about disasters and how things will be, if the things hit the fan, so to speak. I grew up, I was born in 1964. I grew up in Brazil up until the early 80s. I used to come back quite a bit in the mid 80s. And in Brazil, we've had four different currencies in the last 80 years. And I know it's a third world country and there's a lot of poverty, but we've been through in Brazil, and I remember in the late 80s, through currency collapses, and it's disruptive, but it's not the end of the world. Mainly because a currency or a national currency, fiat currency, is basically a human construct. It's not like a natural disaster or war. When you have a currency collapse, the financial system implodes, but the real economy, nothing happens to it. You still have the capital, you still have the farmland, you still have factories, buildings. All you really need is someone to reset the system and bring back a new currency, and hopefully that new currency will have the confidence to keep, to start things going. I'm not saying that it's not hard and you don't have hardships when that happens. I remember in the late 80s in Brazil, I was fortunate enough that my family, could go through this currency collapse. One thing I would say is that you don't want to have too much of your wealth in the bank, like in a current account. Don't keep money in the bank, too much money in the bank. The best thing to have is, of course, real assets like property, gold or silver. Back then, I wasn't into gold and silver when I was that young, but I'm sure a lot of people did. Or to have your assets abroad as well, that helps, in dollars. But now that we're talking more of maybe a potential financial collapse in the West, I think it's very difficult to diversify politically, especially if the dollar and the fiat money system backed by the dollar is going to implode. I don't think you can escape having money abroad anywhere. That's why I think gold and silver, physical gold and silver is important. Having your own home, property, hopefully not too much debt. And, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to buy a house and have a big mortgage because if the system collapses, everything will be written off, all the mortgages, and I'll own the house outright. But let me tell you, from listening to Jim Sinclair, he explained how during the German hyperinflation, people who had mortgages, after the Reichsmark collapsed, when they brought back the new Rentenmark, they made sure that the mortgage that people had was revalued at the new rate and was, based on the price of gold before everything collapsed. So yeah, I wouldn't be too, gang-ho about buying a property and having a big debt attached to it or a big mortgage. One story, back from the 80s in Brazil, one of my uncles, he's a doctor, and a day before the banks, closed and the currency collapsed, he bought a property for his, consultancy for his office. And he exchanged on the property the day before everything imploded. So the person who sold him the property, he had the cash in the bank. And my uncle, luckily, excuse me, had property, a title to that property the day before everything imploded, and they collapsed the currency and reset it into a new currency. So he was very lucky that he had a property that was worth real value. And unfortunately, the person who sold him the property was stuck with the old currency. So very, very lucky. I don't think, my uncle was thinking about that, but he was lucky that he got the property. And I remember going to the supermarkets. The shelves are very empty because producers, growers, if they can't trust the currency, they're not going to sell their produce or whatever into the market. So you get shortages. And I remember my dad had a friend who had a farm outside Rio, and he was able to get some meat because he had, cattle farm. So, knowing someone helps. But from what I remember, it wasn't too bad. You had shortages of things, but it wasn't the end of the world. And, they reset everything. I think after that, the currency again, it was late 80s, again it collapsed. And then they came with the real back in the early to mid 90s. And the real has, survived for Brazil, over 25 years, which is not too bad. And yeah, prepping. Well, personally, I live near London, which is a big city. Well, I live in London, but outside London. So I'm close enough also to the countryside. So that's a good thing. Being in the city, that could be a problem. What else about, I just think that we need to be more realistic and not be too gloom and doom. Because there's nothing wrong with the economy. What's wrong is our monetary system and the debt. I actually think longer term, it would be a good thing if the debt imploded and collapsed and we could reset the system and start again. Who owns a lot of the debt? It's the 1%, is the very rich. And I think they can, they will lose a lot. Also, savers will lose a lot. People who, even people who are not part of the 1%. But I think going forward, what we've got right now is unsustainable. The West, the US, the UK, Europe, we've got so much debt, and we're basically propping up this debt. And what that's doing is keeping asset prices high, and it's punishing the young people who are starting off right now. They can't afford to buy, their own property to live in. Rents are really high. I know I've benefited from it, of course, because my wife and I bought our first, family property back in the mid 90s. So we've done okay from that. But it's not sustainable. And the other problem with the system right now is that the baby boomers are retiring, and up until 2030, there's going to be more and more pensioners in the West. And I think it's one of the reasons why they've allowed mass immigration into the US, into Western Europe. It's because they think they need to fill the gap, because fertility rates in the West are very low. So, back in the 50s and 60s, the welfare state could be financed because there's like 7 workers for every pensioner. Now it's almost like, I'm not sure exactly what it is, it's 2 to 1, or it's getting to a point where there's not enough people working, and there's too many older people retiring, and a lot of them depend on a paycheck from the government or from the state. So when is it going to implode the system? Mathematically, it's not sustainable. I don't know what's going to trigger it. It will be painful. I think for younger people, actually, it's not going to really hurt them. It's probably going to be the best thing that can happen for them, because right now they're not doing well. You know, the people from 20 to the early mid 30s, they're not as well off as we used to be 20 years ago. So for them, it won't make much difference. It will hurt a lot, I think, the very wealthy. Well, actually, the very wealthy, they will always be wealthy, but the people who are quite well off, if they have a lot of paper assets, they're going to hurt. The older retired people, I think it's not going to be as pleasant for them. But I think a lot of the older people, they live within their means, so they'll be fine. So what I'm trying to say here, yes, there is a lot of worries, gloom and doom, but I think if Brazil, can go through currency collapses, and albeit I know that Brazil is a third world country, but things still function. The economy is still there. So all I'm trying to say is that nothing changes. The system needs that reboot. So the real economy will be there, and human capital will be there. Factories will be there, infrastructure, roads, the ports, they don't disappear. Look at what happened to Germany after World War II. It was totally, destroyed, bombed out of existence, basically. And look at the German economic miracle in the 50s and 60s. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that we need a war. I don't believe in that, that broken window fallacy that the Keynesians have, that, having a war or having a natural disaster is good for the economy. It's never good. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Not having a go at preppers. They should prepare if they think, they need to. It's always good to be prepared for events that come out of left field. But I don't think we should despair. We should just live, life to the full, and not be scared about, things that we can't control. So if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, share it far and wide. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. If you'd like to donate to my channel, there's some links below in the description. I'll talk to you later. Bye.